When I was diagnosed with cancer, my husband said he'd rather not waste life waiting around for a maybe. He took off with my cousin and emptied our joint account. On my birthday, he sent a text that read, "You're a dying investment." I recovered. Quietly. And when he walked into the courtroom 2 years later, his face went pale because. Let me tell you how it started. I was 42. Married to Mark for 13 years. We had 2 kids, a house, and I thought we were happy. Mark worked in real estate, and I was a nurse. We lived in a modest house in Columbus, Ohio. Life wasn't perfect, but we had what we needed. Then I found a lump in my breast. I went to the doctor, and after tests, they told me it was cancer. Stage 3. I remember sitting there, the word cancer echoing in my head like a bad joke. I was scared. I didn't know what it meant, how long I had, or if I'd even make it. I told Mark that night. We were in bed, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him I had cancer and that it was serious. He didn't say anything right away. Just stared at me like I had told him I wrecked his car or something. Then he said the words I'll never forget, "I can't do this. I'd rather not waste life waiting around for a maybe." I asked him what the hell that meant. He told me he wasn't going to spend the next few years playing nurse and watching me fade away. He wanted a life, not this. It was like he had been waiting for an excuse to leave. He packed a bag that night. Didn't say a word to the kids. Just left. A few days later, I found out he had been having an affair with my cousin Jessica. I never liked her much. She always tried to one-up me at family events, but I never thought she'd stab me in the back like this. They didn't just leave. They cleaned out our joint bank account. Mark drained everything. I had about $100 in my personal checking. That's it. And if that wasn't enough, on my birthday, my 43rd birthday, while I was in the middle of chemo, he sent me a text. It said, "You're a dying investment." That's all. No happy birthday. No hope you're doing okay. Just that. I sat on the floor, shaking, reading that message over and over. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. I felt so small. So worthless. Like garbage he had thrown out. The next months were hell. Chemo, radiation, surgery, every day was a fight. I was broke. I sold my wedding ring to pay the rent. I had to ask my parents for help. I hated it. I felt like I had nothing left. My body was weak, my hair was gone, and I had scars all over. My kids, thank God for them, they kept me going. I tried to focus on staying alive. That was my only goal, survive. Every day I told myself, just get through the next hour. Then the next. When I was finally declared cancer-free, I didn't even feel happy at first. Just numb. Like I had survived a war and didn't know how to live again. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because while I was fighting to stay alive, Mark and Jessica were living it up. I saw pictures on Facebook, her in designer dresses, him on boats, expensive vacations. They even bought a house together. All with the money they stole from me. I wanted to let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth it. But every time I looked at my kids, I thought about what they had lost too. I thought about the text he sent me. And I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. So I started planning. I talked to a lawyer. I started gathering documents, bank records, anything I could find. I was quiet about it. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Just kept my head down and kept working. I got stronger. My hair started growing back. I got a job again. Little by little, I rebuilt myself. But I never forgot. And then, 2 years after Mark walked out, I got my chance. It was finally time to face him again. I'll never forget the day I saw him again. 2 years after he left me, I was sitting in a courtroom in Columbus. I was there because I had filed a civil lawsuit, fraud, emotional distress, theft, you name it. My lawyer said we had a solid case. I had spent months gathering everything, bank statements showing how Mark drained our account right after my diagnosis, proof of the affair, photos, texts, and even screenshots of Jessica bragging online about their new life. The day of the hearing, I sat in the back, feeling my heart race. My palms were sweating, but I sat up straight. I was ready. Then the doors opened, and in walked Mark and Jessica. He saw me sitting there, and I swear, his face drained of color. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Jessica's smile faltered for a second too, but she tried to cover it up by flipping her hair and pretending she wasn't shaken. They took their seats on the other side of the room, and I could feel Mark glancing at me. I stared straight ahead, acting like they didn't exist. But inside, my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The hearing started, and my lawyer went in hard. He laid it all out, how Mark emptied the joint account, left me with nothing while I was going through cancer treatments, how he sent that disgusting text on my birthday, how he and Jessica used the stolen money to fund their lifestyle, buying a house, starting a business, taking trips, buying designer clothes. Mark's lawyer tried to play it down, saying it was a misunderstanding and that Mark didn't intend harm. They said I was overstating the situation and that it was just a failed marriage. That's when I snapped. I stood up in court and said, "Failed marriage? No. He abandoned me while I was fighting for my life. He stole every penny we had. He left me to die." Mark shifted in his chair, looking like he wanted to disappear. Jessica stared at the floor, chewing her lip. Then something unexpected happened. My cousin's ex-husband, Eric, showed up. I hadn't even known he was coming. He had been married to Jessica before she started screwing around with Mark. Turns out, she had taken him for everything too. He came with paperwork, proof that Jessica had used some of the money from the business she started with Mark to pay off her personal debts from her divorce with Eric. It was a mess. My lawyer looked at me, grinning like a shark. We were building a case bigger than I had even planned for. But it didn't stop there. The real twist came when we subpoenaed their business records. That's when we discovered that Mark had been lying on tax forms. They had been funneling money through fake expenses, basically laundering cash to avoid taxes. My lawyer got a forensic accountant on board, and they found thousands in unreported income. It wasn't just a civil case anymore, it was looking like fraud on a whole other level. Possible criminal charges. And I was just getting started. The day of the final hearing felt like the air in the room was electric. The courtroom was packed. Mark sat at the defendant's table looking pale and stiff, like a man waiting for a storm to hit. Jessica sat next to him, clutching his arm so tight it looked like she might snap it in half. My lawyer sat next to me, calm and focused, with a fat stack of files in front of him. When the judge walked in, everyone stood, and I swear I could feel Mark holding his breath. The hearing started. My lawyer laid out everything, step by step, brick by brick. He showed how Mark had drained our joint account right after I got diagnosed. He showed how they used the money to fund their lifestyle, vacations, the new house, the fancy cars. Then he brought in the texts. He read aloud the birthday message Mark sent me, "You're a dying investment." People in the courtroom gasped when they heard that. Even the judge's face twitched like he couldn't believe it. Then my lawyer dropped the bomb. The forensic accountant took the stand and explained, in plain words, how Mark and Jessica had been hiding income, faking expenses, and lying on their taxes. It wasn't just theft, it was tax fraud, and a big one. The numbers added up to felony charges. That's when the judge turned to Mark and Jessica. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "This is not just a civil matter anymore. Based on the evidence presented, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. You may face charges for fraud, theft, and tax evasion." Jessica's face went sheet white. She whispered something to Mark, her eyes wide. Mark just sat there, staring at the table like he'd lost all hope. But it wasn't over. The judge ruled in my favor. Mark and Jessica were ordered to pay back every penny they stole from me, plus damages for emotional distress. It totaled over $500,000. They didn't have it, of course. The judge ordered the seizure of their assets, the house, the cars, the business accounts. Everything they had built off my money was going to be taken. And then came the final blow. The IRS got involved. They started an audit, and it turned out Mark and Jessica owed back taxes and penalties that would wipe out whatever they had left. They were ruined. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I could finally breathe again. I had won. But I wasn't done yet. I found out that Jessica's ex-husband, Eric, had filed his own lawsuit based on what we uncovered. Mark and Jessica were facing legal battles on every side. Their friends turned on them. They were known in town as liars and cheats. The business they started? Shut down. Blacklisted. They couldn't get loans, clients, or even a decent job. Then, a few months later, I heard that Mark had been arrested. The DA pressed charges for tax fraud. He spent 6 months in jail before he got out on probation. Jessica left him during that time, moved out, took whatever little she could salvage, and disappeared. As for me? I stayed quiet. I didn't throw parties or post about it online. I didn't need to. People knew. They saw. I focused on my kids, my work, and rebuilding my life. But I'll tell you this. On my next birthday, when I turned 45, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "I'm sorry." No name. Just those 2 words. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Mark's apology was too little, too late. That chapter of my life was over. And I was finally free.